When you feel out of breath, it's not because you don't have enough oxygen. This is applicable for your short distance running and your long distance running. Even ultra marathons, you can use this technique in your race, especially when it's getting hard, especially when you feel that buildup of CO2 and you're just like needing more energy, needing more oxygen. You can use these techniques and you can actually accelerate during your run itself. And my guarantee is that you're already doing this to some degree when you're really pushing in a race. But if you can learn to do it deliberately, do it more effectively and start it earlier and do it before the race, then that's when you really unlock your ability to go PR mode, baby, right now. Today, we are talking about a second hack that you can use for your running that you can implement in just a couple of minutes, in about 5 minutes or so, that is going to take your performance to another level. What we talked about yesterday was a breathing technique, the Wim Hof technique, in order to hyper oxygenate your blood, in order to run faster or do more push-ups or whatever it is, perform better instantly. It takes about 5 minutes. If you missed that one, scroll down and go ahead and open that up in another window and watch that when you're done here. Today, we're going to take we're still going to talk about the breath, but we're going to talk about the other thing that happens with your breath, and that is the expulsion of CO2. I'm going to break it down step by step for you here. I'm going to tell you why this is so important. All right. So with your running, metabolically, to recap just a little bit of yesterday, by having more oxygen available to you, there's two things that are going to happen. Number one is that you can metabolize more fat earlier on. So you push the wall in a marathon off, right? Number two, what you do when you get more oxygen in is you alkalize your blood. This is a really good thing. This is great for being able to improve your muscle contractility, your power. So you can run faster when you have less CO2 in your blood. And it alkalizes your blood, which allows you to recover faster. Okay, now what we're talking about today is CO2. Now, CO2 does not do these things. CO2 does something else. And in fact, purging CO2 itself, that's not the performance boost. The performance boost comes from getting rid of a limitation. So when you have a CO2 in your blood, when you have more of it, it's going to impede you. And so we want to minimize that. Now, the way that CO2 impedes you is it gives you fatigue. Like, where does fatigue come from? You go out to a track and you run a mile as hard as you can, time trial, right? Or you run a 5K. Let's see, where is this most applicable? Any distance, really. Any middle distance and long distance event where you are getting that sense of fatigue that's coming from something other than pure acid, pure hydrogen ions. So I'm going to call this like a mile and above, which is most of us in this group, right? I don't think we have any like competitive 100 meter runners in this group. So the reason you get tired in a 5K, for example, well, it's like if I asked you, why are you tired at the end of a race? You might say something like, "Ooh, I'm out of breath." Okay. You're out of what? You're out of breath. So when you feel out of breath, it's not because you don't have enough oxygen. It's not because of that. It's because you have too much CO2 accumulated. So what you want to do is breathe all that CO2 out. Now, it sounds easy, right? It sounds like, oh, well, I'm breathing in. So every time I breathe in, I get oxygen. Every time I breathe out, I expel CO2. Kind of, yeah. But what if you could expel even more CO2 with your exhale? What if you could do that? And then your blood CO2 levels go down and your sensation of fatigue is reduced. Now, I'm going to ask you a question here. You just have to be honest with yourself. And that is, at the end of a race, when you're pushing really hard, you know how you get that feeling that you're never at maximum? Like, you always finish a race knowing that you could have done slightly better with like nutrition or pacing or something like that. But you always know that you could have kicked harder, or you could have started your kick a second earlier or 10 seconds earlier or something. You always have a sensation that you could go, if it's just like a fraction more, there's something you could summon in order to go more. And those times where we really do summon absolutely everything, we feel really proud of ourselves. It's like, that's a great race. But to actually summon everything 100% is quite a rare event. And you can always go, even if you did that, you can even say, well, yeah, I was going as hard as I possibly could in that latter portion. What would happen if you went a couple seconds faster in the earlier portion? What would happen then? So there's always, we could have gone faster. So why do we have that sensation? Because we know that part of what limited our race time was that in some way we kind of gave up. In some way we pushed as hard as we believe we can. And we can be proud of it. It could be a PR. It could be a great time. It could be very respectable. But deep down we know that there's another gear. There's always like that other gear. If you had to, if someone had a gun to your head or something like that, right? Or worse, you could milk a little bit more. So why can't we? If we're able to, why don't we? And because there's like this tiny little voice that just doesn't allow us to push that much harder. Now, what is that voice? Well, I'm not going to tell you what the voice is, but I'm going to tell you what makes that voice come to the forefront, and that is pain. That is suffering. Now, we know that there's an experiment done. I'm trying to remember when this was done, but it's by Michael Stevens from Vsauce. You can find this on YouTube. What is the scariest thing that a human being can undergo? That would be scary to every single person, no matter their age, their gender, when they've lived, or what they've gone through. What would scare everybody? And we tried to figure this out, right? In the lab, we tried all kinds of things. And what was first hypothesized was that, your amygdala, if you can trigger fear in the amygdala through X, Y, or Z, well, it'll trigger fear, because fear comes from the amygdala, right? That was what we thought, and it's a pretty good guess. But I'm going to tell you it's not true. Because there was an experiment done with a woman who had a brain trauma and she lost her amygdala. So she didn't feel fear. She was held up, she was mugged, she was held up at gunpoint or knife point, I can't remember. And she was like fearless. She antagonized the attacker. So they brought her into the lab and tried to induce fear and couldn't do it. But there's one thing they could do that induced fear. So this will induce fear, panic in every single human being, what I'm about to tell you. And it has a direct correlation with your running because it has to do with CO2. Ready? In order to guarantee a panic response in someone, all you need to do is force CO2 inhalation or CO2 buildup, part one, without an obvious end to it. And that will induce panic in literally every person, whether you have an amygdala, a functioning brain or not, you will panic. And here's a real easy example. If you are underwater, if you have the sensation that you're going to drown, well, you're holding your breath, CO2 is building up. And if you know that it has an end coming to it, you don't panic as much. You just know it's going to end. But if you don't know it's going to end, like if you're held underwater or if you're like in a submarine, something like that, well, there's panic. There's definite panic. There's extreme discomfort. And that's the kind of discomfort that happens, maybe on a slightly less level, but that's the kind of discomfort that happens when you're running because the effect is the same. Your CO2 levels rise so much that it induces this kind of fear response, this kind of panic, this kind of suffering, and we won't push through it. You can only push so hard. You can push very, very extraordinarily hard, but at some point there'll be a limit. And that limit seems to be correlated with how much CO2 is in your blood. The higher the CO2, the more uncomfortable you are. So very high levels of CO2 at the end of a race, very uncomfortable. You cannot stand it anymore. You'll do anything to get out of it. And you could have reasons why. You're going to push, you're going to hold on. You can even kick it in a little bit. But to actually get to that next level, your brain really won't let you do it unless you have a really strong reason. Like you're going to die if you don't, right? So CO2. Now, I'm going to share with you a little story because stories are fun and we can learn something from this. I didn't figure this out on my own, right? I like to think I'm a smart dude, but this is next level. I'm not sure I'd have come across this if not for being a fan of this guy. Okay, here we go. This guy right here, his name is David Blaine. How many of you know David Blaine? I've talked about him before, and here's why I'm going to talk about him. So first of all, he's a magician, but it's so much more than a magician. He actually does incredible feats of endurance, and he holds several world records, or has held several world records. So we talked about Wim Hof being the Iceman yesterday. So here's David Blaine encapsulating himself in ice in New York City for all to see, and he did Frozen Alive or something like that was the name of the challenge. And he learned how to control his body temperature. And part of it was through his breathing. We talked about that yesterday. You can actually control your core body temperature through your breath, even if you're submerged in ice. And that's what Wim Hof did, right? So David Blaine started to master these breathing techniques. And this was, a decade and a half ago. So let's take it to step number 2. Here he is again. Now he's on the Oprah Winfrey show, right? And here he is in a bubble holding his breath, and he's going for a world record on live TV. Now, I'll spoil it for you. He actually got the world record. And here he is. This is before, the actual world record was about 17 minutes, something seconds. Here he is at 14:51. That is a long time to hold your breath. I'm going to share with you how he did it. There's a little bit of a trick, but one of the techniques is that yesterday, he hyperoxygenates his blood. Then he does a CO2 purge. He also couples that with cold water immersion, meditation, and lots of practice. Okay? But CO2 purge is the technique for holding your breath. Okay? Now, and the reason is because, remember yesterday, we talked about bringing the oxygen levels up. Now we want to talk about bringing the CO2 levels down, and we want to have them both happen at the same time. Maximum oxygen, least amount of CO2. And when you're in that state right there, that's when your performance will shoot through the roof. Now I'm going to prove this to you right here with one of you in this group. Lacey, she told me she couldn't be on this call right here, but check this out. She sent this to me just a couple of days ago. Here's Lacey. I gave her that challenge to do with the CO2 purge and the Wim Hof technique. And she said, I did that challenge with the push-ups. I told you guys yesterday, do this technique, do your push-ups, get a baseline. She did this. She could do 18 push-ups. Then she did these breathing techniques. Instantly could do 39 push-ups. Now, I told you that you could double your push-ups in 5 minutes. So she more than doubled it in 5 minutes. This is not hyperbole here. You can double your strength. You can double your muscular power. Double it in 5 minutes. Now, if you combine yesterday with today, it may take you 7 minutes or so to do this. And I'll share with you how I did this and how I combined the two. But recall, this guy here, there he is, setting the world record. Now, we're lucky enough that just a short while ago, he did this stunt here. This was a new one. He did this in 2020, right? And here he is holding on to a bunch of balloons and then riding them all the way up towards basically the height of Mount Everest, like 25,000 feet or so. Now, when you go up that high, first of all, it's amazing that he's just holding on to this and going, right? This is why he's a world-class performer like this. But what happens is the basically oxygen available to you, the pressure of the oxygen of the air goes down and you get less oxygen with every breath. And if you go up fast enough, like people when they climb Everest, they take oxygen, right? And they're going up slow. This guy got up there in no time at all. So you don't have time to adapt. You quickly will not be able to breathe properly unless you do what he did. Now, while he's up there, he had a pulse oximeter on his finger, showing it to the camera so that they could see what his oxygen levels are. And for most people, when they get up that high that quick, oxygen saturation will go down and they will pass out. Pass out, okay? And you don't want to pass out while holding on to balloons, riding it up to 25,000 feet. So what he did is he learned this technique, and that's what I'm sharing with you here. Serena says, Andrew, I do 40 military push-ups every day. Booyah! That's pretty amazing, actually. Good job, Serena. That's part of my strict strength training program. So Serena, if I know you were on yesterday as well, combine yesterday's technique with this one, and I'm betting you that I don't know if 40 is a maximum or not for you, but let's pretend 40 was a maximum. Then my guess is you'd be able to do at least 60. I'm guessing 40 is not a maximum for you if you do it every day. So I'm betting with this technique, you'll be able to do 80. And we'd love to hear back. Go ahead and report back. But onward here. So what he did is as he's going up, he did this technique, and that's the one I'm going to show you today. He didn't do the hyperoxygenation. He had oxygen with him just in case, okay? But then he did this technique. And this technique is what clears the CO2 out so that you basically don't get that panic sensation, and you can allow for more oxygen to come in. All right. Now, before I show you the technique, we'll go a little bit shorter than we did yesterday. I'm going to tell you for myself a way that this manifested that's really cool. And then again, for one of you, what you guys are doing. Now, for me, a few weeks ago, I did a breath hold. I often, every now and then, right, with some regularity, I'll hold my breath. I'll set a timer on my phone. I'll time it. And what I'll do is I'll do Wim Hof breathing. So if I just hold my breath, just right now, I could probably hold it for somewhere between 1:45 and 2:30. It's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. Most people can't hold it for a minute. Most runners can do about between 1 and 2 minutes, right? So I'm right in there with you guys. But then I did Wim Hof style breathing, and I could hold my breath for, my record was, I can't remember exactly. I think it was about 245. I might have hit just over 3 one time. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But I know about high 245, 250. That's how I could hold my breath. Then what I decided a few weeks ago was that I was going to give this everything I had. I was going to try a CO2 purge. Now, what I did was, first, Wim Hof breathing. Second, CO2 purge breathing. Then I held my breath. And I did this in a pool. I held onto the side of the pool, face down in the pool. I had my girlfriend there to be able to tap me every 1 minute to let me know. And I'll tell you, with this technique, how long do you think I went? Now, I'll tell you, Harry Houdini, the great magician who did escape stuff in the water torture chamber, he would dunk himself in the water in a straitjacket and he'd escape with handcuffs and stuff. He held his breath for right around 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So if you can do 3 minutes and 30 seconds, you are on par with Harry Houdini. Pretty good. Okay, I did this, and this isn't to brag, this is to show you I'm right where you are, but with this technique, what can be done? In 5 minutes, I was able to hold my breath for 4 minutes and 2 seconds. I'm convinced I could have gone longer if I actually meditated before, brought my heart rate down even more, was able to relax even more, could practice even more. I'm convinced I could have gone 5, but until I do it, I won't say I did. 4:02. Holding your breath for over 4 minutes is not something most people can do. You can only do this if you train for it, if you're like a free diver, or if you learn these techniques. All right, so that's what I'm going to share with you here. Now, I don't care if you can hold your breath for 4 minutes, but if you could hold your breath for 4 minutes, if you knew the technique to be able to do that and applied that technique before you go out on intervals or before the gun goes off in a race, you tell me, are you in a better position to be able to run well in that race? More oxygen, which is what you need for metabolism. Less CO2, which is the number one factor that is going to cause you to slow down or stop or not go any faster, right? CO2. So we're going to maximize one, we're going to minimize the other. So here's the technique. I'm not going to review Wim Hof technique right now, but I will show you the CO2 purge. So CO2 purge, just like yesterday, we're going to make a scale here, right? So here's breath all the way out at the bottom of your screen. This is forceful exhale, not just, but okay. When I did that right there, I kept squeezing air out of my lungs. That's all the way out. And then all the way in is at the top of the screen. And that's not just but all the way in at the top of the screen. That's our range. So I'm going to use my hand here and I'm going to show you the technique. The technique is essentially a sharp inhale in. So it's not a normal deep breath in. It's actually, let's get it in really quick. And then, unlike Wim Hof technique where we just let it go, we're going to push the air out. Now, the reason we push is because you can't get if you just let the air out of your lungs all the way, just let it out, relax, you still have air in your lungs. It's just because the pressure on and in your lung outside and lungs are the same. So you let the air out until it's equal pressure. But you could forcefully push more air out. When you use force, you contract the muscles between your ribs here. They're called the intercostals. You contract those and you can actually forcefully exhale. Forcefully exhale. When you contract those muscles, you can get more air out. So this is important. So we're going to do a forceful exhalation, but we're going to do it over a period of time. It's not going to be push it all out. We're going to squeeze it all out to the bottom like that. That's what we're doing. Now in order to push it out slowly, we need to create some resistance. And what I'm going to bet is that you do this in your running and you don't even know it. So when you're running really hard, you don't just let the air out like that. You let it out kind of like through pursed lips like that. I want you to go ahead and purse your lips just a little bit and blow out hard right now. Just do that. Okay, now I want you to do it again, but notice where is your tongue when you do that. Ready? Breathe out. Do it for longer. When you do that, where is your tongue? Naturally, your tongue is going to go to the bottom teeth, pressed up against the back of the bottom teeth. That's the technique. Your body will naturally do it when you're in a state of kind of like fight or flight, when you're really pushing hard at a race. And you'll notice this when you're going really hard up a long hill, like a 1/4 mile hill, or a long, hard interval, 400 or an 800, really tough interval where you're really working. You'll notice that you start to breathe by your lips are kind of creating resistance, not it's. And when you do that, your tongue goes to the bottom of your mouth. It's the most natural place for it. So now we know the inhale technique. It's sharp in, it's quick, all the way in. And then when we breathe it out, tongue to the bottom teeth, pressed up against the back of them, and we push out like that. And when you push out, you want to make a resonance in the back of your throat. The best way to do this is you can hum, you can, I can't even do it. You could make a Z noise like that, or you could make a hum like that. You want to make some kind of noise so there's a resonance in your throat. And the reason for this is just by doing the humming noise alone, you increase the nitric oxide in your blood, which is advantageous for your running, okay? You can increase the nitric oxide simply by humming or om. You can make the om noise, om. Those of you who are into meditation, you may do that, and it brings you to a different place. Why does it? Maybe a bunch of reasons. This is one of them. It increases the nitric oxide. So now you know you're breathing in. When you breathe out, you know the tongue position. You know that you're going to push it out all the way to the bottom over a longer period of time. And you're going to do it with some kind of auditory signal that creates a resonance in your mouth, in your throat, or even in your chest if you can. That's the technique. That's how you get rid of CO2. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to just do a couple of them with you. So watch and follow along if you like. We're going to go up and we're going to push it out. It's very simple, right? It goes. Okay, already I'm feeling a little bit lightheaded. If you feel like that, like I am right now, you can back it off a little. You can push out with a little bit less intensity. You can push out a little softer for a longer period of time, or you can push out a little bit less, not all the way to the bottom until you get used to it. But that's the essential technique there. Now, if you do just that and only that, and you want to do 10 to 15 rounds of that, and then you want to do some recovery breathing. Recovery breathing is take a minute, shake it out, breathe normal, and then take a big breath in. Go back to Wim Hof, just for a couple of breaths, and relax. Okay, now that's going to be a round. How many rounds of this do you want to do? What David Blaine does is 3 to 5 rounds of this. So you're doing only 10 breaths. Wim Hof, you're doing 30. Here you're doing about 10. But you're going to do, instead of 3, you're going to do 3 to 5 rounds. So it takes about the same amount of time. Okay, this is really powerful. Now the same runner here, so Lacey, she did these techniques together, and I put this up here. She doubled her push-ups. I got a message from her. She's killing it right now. And she did mile intervals a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and told me that she ran her fastest miles. And actually I've got another, Terry Lynn. Terry Lynn did these techniques as well just a week or two ago, and reported back that she did those techniques and then ran her fastest mile ever, lifetime, ever, directly after. This is important stuff. Now you'll see sometimes world-class people doing this in other sports. You'll see it in powerlifting. You'll see it in grappling, something where or you'll see it in high jump. You'll see it when people are going to do something explosive because we naturally do it. You'll see someone before they go for a high jump or something powerful, a power lift or a shot put. You'll see them shake it out and they'll go. You'll see them do this naturally. Our bodies tend to know what to do, right? And that's to increase muscular power. You don't see distance runners doing this as much. Although you will see it with very experienced distance runners, whether they know they're doing this or not. You'll see this with like Olympic athletes when they're on the starting line of the track, and you can see them all lined up before a 5,000 or a 10,000, and you'll see some people just naturally doing these breathing techniques because we're like called to it. We're called to hyperoxygenate, and we're also called to and do things like get ourselves pumped up. And when we get pumped up to go do something tough, it always is with a contractility in our diaphragm and our intercostals, right? We do this naturally. What if you did it deliberately? What if you became one who does it deliberately? And there's a lot of athletes who do this deliberately. I shared with you yesterday some wrestlers, some grapplers, tennis players, swimmers, and runners who do this. So again, if you didn't watch part 1 yesterday, go watch that. When you combine these two, and Serena, for example, I'd love to hear what your push-ups can be when you combine these two. Go ahead and type, we know you're doing 40 right now. Maybe get a max on it. Maybe tomorrow, see what your max is, but don't change anything. And then wait a day or two. Do these breathing techniques. You can practice these breathing techniques, but then in a few days, go on again and then report back to us here. My guess is that you're going to double this. This works for doubling. I see this done all the time with 70 push-ups. And so doubling from 40 to 80 would be roughly a double. I'm going to guess you're going to go 70 or 80. The benefits are fastest mile of your life, double your push-ups. So maybe double your squats or push. It's like double your power and your strength. And for me, I was able to essentially almost double how long I could hold my breath, which says a lot. If you can actually get your body into that place where you have that much reserve, just imagine what it could do for your running as well. And finally, these techniques you can use not just before your run, which I recommend, but you can use during your run. Kind of hard to do Wim Hof breathing during your run. CO2 purge breathing you can absolutely do during your run. And I'll leave you with this, a little story for myself. I just ran a 50 kilometer race on trail a little while ago, and I killed it. I ran a PR, but I want to tell you that I'm not highly trained right now. I'm just kind of running. I'm running for fun, doing some long runs, but I'm not doing any serious workouts. I'm running just as maintenance right now. Yet I still ran a PR in the 50K on trail. It was a pretty flat trail, but it was still trail. It wasn't like track or road, right? And I ran almost my marathon PR pace from like 5 years ago on trail for 50K. And I came 1 minute shy of the course record. I actually broke the course record, but I got second place. And the guy who won, well, broke the record too, and he was 1 minute ahead of me. But I was gaining on him in the last 10 miles. He was 4 minutes ahead of me, and over the last 10 miles, he ended up 1 minute ahead of me. So I was gaining, and I used this technique with 8 miles to go. I started implementing the CO2 purge, and it was incredible. I was able to maintain my pace and keep accelerating. And I was really tired. My muscles hurt. I felt kind of like out of shape. It was a long run for me. I hadn't run over 20 miles in like 2 or 3 months. And I was able to crush this race and run a PR in the 50K. And my time was, see if I remember, it was 3:31. I think it was 3:31. No, it might have been 3:20. I can't remember. Whatever 7-minute flat pace is for 50K. So anyway, this is applicable for your short distance running and your long distance running, even ultra marathons. You can use this technique in your race, especially when it's getting hard, especially when you feel that buildup of CO2 and you're just like needing more energy, needing more oxygen. You can use these techniques and you can actually accelerate during your run itself. And my guarantee is that you're already doing this to some degree when you're really pushing in a race. But if you can learn to do it deliberately, do it more effectively and start it earlier and do it before the race, then that's when you really unlock your ability to go PR mode, baby, right now. It takes 5 minutes. You combine the two, it takes about 5 to 7 minutes. And isn't that worth it? To be able to crush your race times, long distance, short distance. And a really effective place to use this is during your intervals. Running like 5 by 1 mile, well, you have 5 opportunities before you take off to do these techniques, and you can crush your intervals as well. So I'll leave you guys with that. For now, take care. Hey, if you liked that video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And the best way to give back is to take the link for this video and send it to just one of your friends. It really helps us grow, and we appreciate it. Thank you. We'll see you on the next video.